Rosa Bennett was standing in her son's living room, the kind of home she could never have afforded to give him when he was growing up, watching his fiancée Marissa twirl in front of a mirror in her wedding dress. It was beautiful, of course. Everything about Marissa's life was beautiful. But Rosa wasn't there to admire the dress. She was there because Daniel had asked her to come, to be part of this moment, to feel like she belonged. And for a few minutes, she let herself believe it. She let herself believe that after 2 years of subtle coldness, forced smiles, and carefully worded exclusions, maybe things were finally changing. Maybe Marissa was warming up to her. Maybe Rosa Bennett was overthinking everything. But then she heard it. Marissa was laughing with her bridesmaids, champagne glasses in hand, and one of them asked if Rosa Bennett was excited about the wedding. Marissa paused, just long enough for the room to quiet, and then she said it, clear as day, loud enough for Rosa to hear from where she stood in the hallway. Honestly, the best wedding gift Rosa could give us is to stay out of sight completely. The bridesmaids laughed. Not nervously, not awkwardly. They laughed like it was the most natural joke in the world. And Daniel, Rosa's son, the boy she had raised alone, he was right there. He heard it. Rosa knew he did. But he didn't say a word. Rosa Bennett had sold her home in Bronzeville 2 years earlier. Not just any home. The house she and her late husband had spent 30 years paying off. The place where Daniel had grown up, where every corner held a memory she wasn't ready to let go of. But when Daniel told her he and Marissa had found their dream house and were just short on the down payment, Rosa didn't hesitate. She gave them $980,000, nearly everything she had left after her husband passed. She told herself it was an investment in family, in closeness, in being part of her son's future. She imagined Sunday dinners, holidays together, maybe even a room where she could stay when she visited. A space that felt like hers. But that's not what happened. From the very first week, Marissa made it clear that Rosa Bennett was a guest in that house, not family. When Rosa offered to help pick out furniture, Marissa smiled tightly and said they had already hired a designer. When Rosa suggested a recipe for Daniel's favorite meal, Marissa rolled her eyes and muttered something about outdated tastes. And when Rosa stayed over for the first time, she was given the smallest guest room at the end of the hall, the one with no pictures on the walls, no personal touch, nothing that said she mattered. Marissa never called it Mom's room. She called it the guest room, as if Rosa were no different from a distant cousin passing through town. At family dinners, Marissa would cut Rosa off mid-sentence, redirect conversations away from her, or wise, pretend she hadn't spoken at all. And Daniel, he said nothing. He laughed at Marissa's jokes, agreed when she complained that Rosa slowed things down, and slowly, quietly, let his mother disappear from his life. 2 years of this. 2 years of being erased. Rosa Bennett didn't cry in front of them. She didn't storm into the room and demand an apology. She didn't even let Marissa know she had heard those words. Instead, she walked quietly to her car, sat behind the wheel with her hands trembling on the steering wheel, and did something she had been avoiding for 2 years. She called her attorney. Elena Ruiz had been Rosa's lawyer for over a decade, the woman who had helped her settle her husband's estate and navigate the paperwork when she sold her home in Bronzeville. Elena had warned her back then, warned her not to hand over that money without proper documentation, without making sure her name stayed on something official. And Rosa, trusting her son, had almost ignored that advice. Almost. But Elena had insisted. And so, buried in the legal documents of that house purchase, in the fine print that Marissa had rushed Rosa through signing, was a clause Rosa had nearly forgotten about. She still legally co-owned 40% of that house. Marissa had tried to get Rosa to sign additional paperwork a year ago, documents that would have transferred full ownership to Daniel and Marissa alone. But Rosa had hesitated. Something in her gut told her to wait, to ask Elena first. And she never signed. Now, sitting in her car outside that beautiful house she had paid for, Rosa listened as Elena confirmed what she already suspected. The deed still listed Rosa Bennett as a part owner. Marissa didn't know. Daniel probably didn't either. And that meant Rosa had something she hadn't realized she still possessed. Power. Real, legal, financial power. Elena's voice was calm but firm. If Rosa wanted, She could force a sale of the property. She could demand immediate repayment of her contribution. She could, if she chose, make their lives very complicated. And for the first time in 2 years, Rosa Bennett smiled. The next morning, Rosa Bennett woke up early, made herself a cup of coffee, and sat down at her small kitchen table with her phone in hand. She didn't feel angry anymore. She felt clay. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for the Grand Parkview Hotel, the luxury venue hosting Marissa and Daniel's wedding reception. The reception Rosa had been secretly funding for months. $120,000. Marissa had told Daniel's relatives that her parents were covering it, but that was a lie. Marissa's parents had contributed nothing. It was Rosa's money, again, paying for the crystal chandeliers, the imported flowers, the 7-course meal, the live jazz band, and the photographer Marissa had flown in from New York. And the contract, it was in Rosa Bennett's name. When the event coordinator answered, Rosa spoke calmly, politely, and with absolute clarity. She canceled everything. The venue, the catering, the photographer, the band, the florist, all of it. The coordinator hesitated, mentioned cancellation fees, but Rosa had already reviewed the contract with Elena. She knew exactly what she was doing. She paid the fees without complaint and ended the call. That night, Marissa's phone exploded. The hotel had sent a confirmation email about the cancellation, and within an hour, Rosa's phone lit up with furious calls and texts. Daniel called first, his voice shaking with panic and confusion. Then Marissa, screaming so loud Rosa had to hold the phone away from her ear. She accused Rosa of sabotage, of jealousy, of being bitter and alone and mentally unstable. She demanded Rosa fix it immediately, threatened legal action, called her cruel and selfish. And when Marissa finally paused to catch her breath, Rosa spoke. Her voice was steady, almost kind. She said only one thing. You asked me to stay out of sight, Marissa. I'm simply honoring your request. Then she hung up. 3 days later, Daniel and Marissa sat across from Elena Ruiz in her downtown office, looking nothing like the confident couple who had mocked Rosa Bennett in their living room. Daniel's face was pale, his hands fidgeting with his watch. Marissa's eyes were red, her jaw tight, oscillating between panic and barely contained rage. Elena didn't waste time on pleasantries. She opened a folder, slid copies of the property deed across the table, and walked them through the reality they had been ignoring for 2 years. Rosa Bennett legally owned 40% of their house. Not as a gift, not as a loan they could forget about, as a co-owner with full legal rights. Marissa tried to interrupt, to argue that Rosa had given them that money willingly, that it was a gift, that she couldn't just take it back. Elena's expression didn't change. She explained, slowly and clearly, that the deed told a different story. Rosa had never signed away her ownership. The paperwork Marissa had tried to rush through a year ago, never completed, never filed. Rosa still had power they didn't know existed. And now, Elena continued, Rosa was exercising that power. She was offering them 2 options. Only 2. Option 1. Buy out Rosa's 40% share at current market value. Elena slid a second sheet of paper across the table with an appraisal figure that made Marissa's face go white. Option 2. Sell the entire house, split the proceeds according to ownership percentages, and go their separate ways. There was no option 3. No negotiation. No middle ground. Daniel leaned forward, his voice breaking slightly, and asked if his mother was really going to do this. Elena looked at him with something close to pity and said that Rosa had already done it. This meeting was a courtesy. Marissa's hands were shaking now. She tried to speak, to argue, to blame Rosa for being vindictive, but the words caught in her throat. Because for the first time, she understood. Everything they had, the house, the lifestyle, the wedding they had planned, had been built on Rosa's quiet, invisible support. And now that support was gone. 2 months later, something unexpected happened. Daniel called Rosa and asked if they could meet for coffee. Not at his house. Not with Marissa hovering nearby. Just the 2 of them, at a small cafe Rosa used to take him to when he was younger. When she arrived, she saw something different in his face. He looked tired, older somehow, but also more present than he had been in years. He told her they had put the house on the market. They couldn't afford to buy her out, and they weren't going to ask her to carry them anymore. He apologized, not with excuses or justifications, but with real, quiet accountability. He said he had let Marissa treat her terribly because it was easier than standing up for what was right. And he was ashamed. A week later, Marissa reached out. She didn't ask for forgiveness right away. She simply told Rosa she had taken a full-time job for the first time in her adult life. She was working in marketing for a mid-sized firm, commuting an hour each way, learning what it meant to own something instead of expecting it. They had started cooking at home. They canceled subscriptions they didn't need. They were learning to live within their means. And it was hard, but it was also clarifying. Marissa's apology came later, over dinner at a modest restaurant Rosa had chosen. It wasn't performative. It wasn't manipulative. It was raw and uncomfortable and real. She admitted she had seen Rosa as beneath her, as someone whose sacrifices were invisible because they were expected. And she was sorry. Rosa didn't forgive her immediately. She didn't rush back into their lives with open arms. But she watched. She listened. And slowly, carefully, she allowed them to rebuild what they had broken. Not with money this time, but with respect. 1 year later, Rosa Bennett received an invitation to dinner. Not a last-minute text or an obligatory holiday gathering, but a handwritten note from Daniel asking her to come to their new home. They had downsized significantly, moved to a quieter neighborhood, a smaller house that fit their actual income. When Rosa arrived, Marissa opened the door with a nervous smile and led her inside. The home was modest, warm, filled with furniture they had chosen together instead of hired designers. They had cooked the meal themselves, Daniel's clumsy attempt at his father's old recipe, the one Rosa used to make every Sunday. After dinner, they asked her to follow them upstairs. At the end of the hallway was a door Rosa hadn't noticed before. Daniel opened it slowly, and inside was a room painted in soft colors, furnished simply but thoughtfully. A comfortable bed, a reading chair by the window, framed photos of her late husband and Daniel as a child on the walls. Marissa's voice was quiet when she spoke. She said it wasn't a guest room. It was Rosa's room, a place that would always be hers, whenever she wanted it, for as long as she needed it. Rosa stood in the doorway, her throat tight, realizing something profound. By saying no for the first time in her life, by refusing to be invisible, she hadn't lost her son. She had saved him. She had forced them both to grow up, to understand what family actually meant. And now, finally, she had earned something money could never buy. Their respect, their love, a place where she truly belonged. Rosa Bennett's story teaches us something most people spend a lifetime avoiding. You can love your children deeply and still say no. You can be generous without allowing yourself to be erased. You can give everything you have, but that doesn't mean you should let others take everything you are. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't sacrifice. It's boundaries. It's standing firm when everyone expects you to bend. It's teaching the people you care about how to stand on their own, even when it breaks your heart to watch them struggle. Rosa didn't destroy her son's life by canceling that wedding. She saved it. She forced him to see what he had become, and she gave him the chance to choose differently. So now we want to hear from you. Would you have done what Rosa did? Would you have had the courage to walk away, to cancel everything, to risk losing your child in order to save the relationship? Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if Rosa's story resonated with you, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that change us forever.